Hi, my little creative weirdos. Welcome back to the podcast. I know you guys can't get a sense of this, but when I tell you I've been popping out episodes lately, I keep finding myself back on this mic. So it's going to be a good year. I have a feeling it's going to be a really good year. And you know what? I might still be talking about some New Year bullshit in this podcast just because me personally, I don't know about you guys, but I will be reflecting on 2025 for basically all of 2026 because that's how long it takes me to process things. So bear with me here. Like, obviously, I'm not going to be talking about resolutions and goals and stuff in this episode. And I don't really think I talked about that in the last two either, but I briefly mentioned ins and outs and stuff like that. And I just think that that's a fun ongoing conversation because it kind of just incentivizes us to figure out what worked and what didn't in the past year. And that's what I like about the new year is that it gives us an excuse to look at those things and it pushes us to not just like become completely comfortable and complacent with how we're living our lives. You know, we start to dig up the dirt and find what's hidden underneath. So, while reflecting a little bit on this past year, as I'm currently living in the energy of 2026, I've really come to realize how much I was relying on how I felt in 2025 with honestly everything I was doing. I was constantly relying on how I felt and I was prioritizing feeling good over anything. And that's a beautiful place to be in. And I really don't regret living from that place. And I do really believe that I needed a full year to just do what nourished me and go the slowest I possibly could and just take my time with things, not put pressure on anything. But you also get to a point where you reach so many walls when you're constantly living your life based on how you feel rather than constantly hiring the bar. So you find yourself being burnt out constantly. And the reason why you're burnt out is because you're not doing anything different. You're taking the same exact approach to a task that's asking you to go outside of the box. And not even to go outside of the box, but just to step outside of the box that you created for yourself, you know, by just like doing one thing differently, even. And that's how it starts, you know, that's how you create a new kind of identity behind your work is by just doing one thing differently and not being so complacent with how you know how to do things now. Because honestly, if you already don't have confidence in the way that you're doing it, in the way that you're creating, or the way that you're approaching life itself, if you already don't feel confident in yourself with that, then what do you have to lose by going outside of the box, you know? So let me just lay this out for you a little bit because I know it kind of sounds like I'm speaking in tongues sometimes when I'm not putting examples behind things. But where this is really stemming from for me is this idea that, you know, at one point in my life, I became so accustomed to living the exact opposite of what feels good to me, but not being able to escape that pattern. So now I'm at this point in my life where this past year I was living more in my comfort zone in a way where I was like still growing and still evolving, but I was evolving as much as I could inside of the box that I created for myself. So I've mastered everything I can inside of that box, but I wasn't allowing myself to go outside of it because the thing with working within your own box and your own limits, it's that the more that you do that, the scarier it is to take a step outside of that box. So now you've created an identity inside of that box that you have subconsciously attached yourself to. So going outside of that feels like you're losing a part of your identity. So your whole world starts crashing down when you try to take a step outside of that because all you know now is that comfort zone that you've created for yourself. And you might still know that stepping outside of your comfort zone always leads to growth, but that doesn't mean that it feels like it in the moment, you know? So the reason why I feel like this past year living inside of my own box I've created has caused me to not gain any more confidence in myself in what I was doing, even though I was mastering everything I already knew how to do, was because the driving force behind everything I'm creating right now is this deeply rooted belief that my gift is to be working at a high level. Like, I truly don't feel any shame in sharing with you guys that I truly believe I'm destined for something greater, right? As I think all of us should believe about ourselves. But that doesn't mean that it always feels that way, right? So, operating from the place that I have been this past year made me feel like I was never gifted enough because I didn't reach my full potential yet. But I wasn't allowing myself to just let my full potential be what it is right now in this moment and trust that it's going to unravel and become what it's destined to be in divine timing, you know? Like, you can't rush that, you can't force that. Truly, who you become as a creative and who you find yourself to be, the identity that you create is something that unfolds naturally, and it's something that you can't force, recreate, undo, or try to put a timestamp on in any way. So another thing that I just want to mention is this idea of success, right? Because I think we are all striving to be the most successful version of ourselves, but I don't think that we as individuals have done the work to actually identify what we consider our highest amount of success as. Like, we don't have a clear understanding on what success means to us as individuals. So, what I realize personally about myself is that I associate a high level of visibility with success. So, a big audience or a big following, like a lot of people knowing who you are, a lot of people resonating with your content has been what I have associated success with, because it's just that kind of conditioned thinking as a person who has grown up with the internet at my disposal. It's just conditioned in us to think that, you know, you're not successful unless you're known by a lot of people, which makes the creation process, especially in the beginning, very lonely and very isolating because you're relying fully on yourself to find a sense of worth and a sense of confidence in what you're creating. But you're not always going to feel confident in what you're doing, even if it is the best of your ability at that time. So we can't fully rely on how we feel while we're creating. But another thing I want to mention is that however you feel in the process of creating something, like if I pulled out a pen and paper right now and I started drawing something, however I feel right now energetically inside of my body is going to channel through what I'm creating. So your emotions get caught in the creation before you. And if you're constantly letting the voice inside of your head that's telling you you're not enough, you're not as good as you need to be, that you don't know enough, all these things, but then you decide to create anyways, but you're operating from that place of fear and that place of uncertainty, then what you're creating is going to reflect that. So this kind of challenges the whole idea of faking it until you make it, because on one side, it's like you do have to say fuck the fear and do it anyways. But on the other side, if that fear is still nagging at you while you're creating and you're not letting trust be the forefront of the creation process, then to some extent, you're holding your full potential back. You're not letting yourself see your full potential through because you're probably just afraid of your full potential. For whatever reason, you're afraid of seeing that through because you know how good it's going to be. And you don't think that you're ready yet. You don't think you're ready for that expansive of a life yet. You don't think you're ready for all that's to come with the quote unquote success of being visible to a public eye. So another thing that I feel like has just been very transformative lately in just how I'm viewing the creation process in general. And obviously, when I talk about the creation process, I'm also directly inciting this idea of creating yourself and evolving as a human being, but you do that through creating and vice versa. So something that I don't think that we recognize enough is that the world is constantly telling you that dreaming, having big aspirations, and being optimistic, having the mindset of what's the best thing that can possibly happen, and letting that be your guide through the creation process. Thinking optimistically is viewed as unrealistic in today's day and age. People will tell you that you're being delusional by having big dreams and by having big standards. You even see that with having high standards for a partner in a romantic relationship. People will tell you that you're delusional for wanting to be treated a certain way and wanting to be respected a certain way because that's how you respect yourself. So if you've gotten to this point in your life where maybe you dabbled a lot with self-hatred in the past, and now you've gotten to a point where you do like yourself, you do actually love yourself even, but sometimes the creation process tries to trick you and make you feel like you hate yourself or like you don't fully know yourself. If you experience that, I encourage you to ask yourself whose thoughts those actually are, because you might come to realize that it wasn't ever your voice talking to you. It was the world telling you to conform to what the majority is doing. And the majority of the world is not going outside of their comfort zone to fulfill their dreams. They're conforming to a 9-to-5 lifestyle that ultimately makes them hate themselves and their lives. And it's really unfortunate, but it doesn't have to be that way. It's a choice, So if dreaming and having aspirations for yourself is viewed as unrealistic, then what's viewed as realistic and attainable is being negative and having the mindset of what's the worst thing that can possibly happen. Like, what are the consequences of taking a risk? Sometimes we get so caught up in all of the potential risks that we're taking that could cause something horrible outside of ourselves to happen, when in reality, if the worst possible thing can happen, then the best possible thing is also just as likely to happen. So going back to what I was saying before about just constantly relying on how you feel, I want to just sort of dive a little bit deeper into that, because for one, I don't want you guys to take that in the wrong way and think that you should always be abandoning yourself and you should always be going against what your body, your mind, your soul is telling you it needs. But I do want you to know that there is a way of listening to your body and your soul's needs while acknowledging that your mind is always telling you a story. Because, if we're breaking up our existence into those three parts, mind, body, soul, our soul is who we are. It's the essence of our being. Our body is the thing that we find physical sensation from, that is linked to our mind and our soul, and that we can tap into through our mind and our soul. But our mind is this psychological processing that is a product of our environment. Your mind is always telling you a story. And one of my favorite things I've ever heard about meditation specifically is that if you sit with your thoughts long enough, you come to realize that your mind is always telling you a story. So this idea of meditation is not about you silencing your thoughts. It's about you looking directly at your thoughts to uncover what they're actually telling you all the time, And since your mind is always telling you a story, it's extremely easy to default to listening to your mind more than your body and your soul, because it will initially feel like the right thing to do. But your soul and your physical body are never relying on instant gratification. Your soul and your physical body flourish and thrive off of consistency and especially off of trust. And that was probably the most prominent theme in my life in 2025, was just trusting the process and trusting myself, trusting that I had the capability to endure the process, no matter what that process is, because if you're fully trusting it, then there's no room to play with the a million amount of outcomes that it could possibly be. You're just trusting that whatever is happening in the here and now is exactly what it's meant to be, because it's going to result in the highest outcome possible, no matter what. So what happens when you start to live your life out of trust rather than fear? Most of us live our lives out of fear, right? Because fear is tied to our minds, right? Like fear is that thing that's always telling us a story, like I said. So it becomes psychologically stimulating every single time we feel fear behind a thought of doing something or taking an actionable step. It releases all these chemical processes that wire our brains, our mind, to think that that's how we're supposed to feel when we're doing something big. So we think that if we're not scared doing something, then it's not meant for us. When in reality, I think trust and confidence are really the telltale to if something's meant for you. I think that trust and confidence are really what your soul and your physical body need to rely on the most without completely crashing and burning. Like, you need to have a sense of security and safety in order to not feel like a constant ball of anxiety, So it's all about just rewiring your brain to come to understand that that can be your new state of awareness, that can be your new operating system. It is possible to go about this thing with more trust than fear than you're used to. But I'm not going to make this whole episode about unwiring your brain and rewiring your brain and having to uproot everything all at once. Like, that's not going to help anyone in any way, But what I do want you to take from this episode is that your success, and when I'm talking about success here, I mean fulfillment. Feeling fulfilled in what you do is on the other side of the work that you are actively avoiding. And that means that you're not always going to feel good while you're doing it. So you sort of, in uncovering and unlearning things to rewire your brain, you have to realize that it sometimes feels like self-abandonment. Doing what you're not used to and what's going to make you feel uncomfortable because it's unfamiliar is going to feel sometimes like you're abandoning yourself and you're not meeting your own needs. But I mention that because we forget to realize that the same goes for listening to how your body feels. You're going to feel like you're abandoning yourself sometimes. When you are operating based on how you feel rather than just taking the actionable step to what you know is going to lead to growth, in a way, you're operating from a place of self-abandonment while you're doing that. Because sometimes the thing that feels good to you is isolating. Sometimes the thing that feels good to you is self-destructive. Sometimes it puts you down an old path or an old habit that you've tried so hard to break. Like, sometimes what feels good to you is not what's actually good for you. But once you step outside of the box you created for yourself, what you'll come to realize is that when you're taking the actionable steps that don't necessarily feel good to you at first, but you start to understand every time you do them that you feel good after doing them. For example, starting to work out again and make it more of a priority so it becomes somewhat of a routine in your daily life or weekly habits. At first, working out is so scary because you don't know how to do exercises with correct form. And, you think everyone's looking at you at the gym. You have to pick an outfit that not only makes you feel confident, but also doesn't limit your ability to move. all those little things, right? It becomes so paralyzing to attach to all those little fears that feel like roadblocks before just doing the thing itself that is so scary, which is working out, right? We view all those little things as walls before that big thing that we want to become the habit we're trying to create for ourselves. So that's what stops us from doing it in general. And that's why we always hear that the hardest part of anything is starting. But when you take all those actionable steps in those areas of your life, what you do is you leave room now and you open up space for the process of creating to be the thing that feels good to you. Because now you're coming to understand, the more you do it and the more consistent that you are, that this thing is changing you over time in a way that you could not have been changed by just staying within your box, you know? So then you start to get very encouraged by the idea that every little actionable step that you're taking in your life outside of the creation process on what you're working towards in some specific project is actually fueling that creative project, because it's changing you and it's making you more comfortable with being uncomfortable, which is so vital to the process. And not only that, but once you start kind of dipping your toes into different avenues that challenge your creativity in different areas and in different ways, you start to realize how vital it is to be versatile as a human being and as a creator. Like, for example, if you're someone who has these creative impulses to do a million things, like you go on Pinterest and the second you get on Pinterest, you're completely inspired to like start a brand, start sewing all your clothes from scratch, sell all your clothes on Poshmark, learn how to play guitar, become a yoga instructor, like all these things. Like, you get so inspired to do a million things all at once, which can make you feel stagnant because that means that you're a beginner at all of those things and that you have to take the hardest step, which is starting in all of those areas. But once you actually start distributing your energy in different avenues, you'll realize how much the one thing, the one creation that you have your mind so set on as being the thing that, you rely on for income, you rely on that for your identity, that thing that you're working towards, you realize how much it fully consumes you when you dip your toes into different areas outside of that creation process. But the fun thing is that every other thing that you're creating outside of the big end all be all project that you have your mind so set on right now is still contributing to who you are as a person, which is then contributing to your creative pursuit. So honestly, the overarching theme here is that you can do no wrong by stepping outside of the box. There is no harm in trying something different. You have nothing to fucking lose by taking a different route and by challenging what you already know. Especially if you don't already have confidence in what you're doing, then what is the harm in stepping outside of the box and feeling like the beginner again? Like, I honestly, lately I've been seeing on the internet a lot of people saying that embarrassment is an unexplored emotion, which I completely 100% agree with. But I also think we forget to realize that being a beginner at something is an underexplored feeling. And we start to feel the pressure that comes with success ultimately, because if you want to be the best version of yourself at something, which is correlated to the highest amount of success that you can achieve, then it comes with pressure. It comes with deadlines. It comes with ripping up every piece of who you thought you were and becoming something completely new through the process of creating. And, tying this to the new year energy that I've been talking about in the past 2 episodes that I uploaded, you guys might be fucking sick of it by now. But like I said in the beginning, I just feel like we're all still consciously processing the previous year while living the present year. And that becomes our perpetuating way of approaching life in general, which can feel really debilitating because it feels like we can never really catch up, right? Like we feel like we're always one step behind. We feel like our potential is always one step ahead of our ability. And it's a really debilitating feeling to constantly feel like we have to catch up to some version of ourselves that doesn't even exist yet, you know? So going back to this idea of being a beginner, I think for me personally, that's what this new year, that's what 2026 is about for me, is calling out from me. It's asking me to just be a beginner again at literally everything in life, in things that I'm already doing, even. And that's the key here. I'm not talking about just starting new and doing something you've never done before. That in itself, obviously, is going to do great things for you. But I want you to realize that the things that you're already doing, that you think you already know how to do the best way possible, come to understand that there's always another way of doing that thing. That doesn't mean that what you're doing and the approach that you're taking is wrong, but there's no harm in taking a different approach. There's no harm in dipping your toes in another pond and seeing what that feels like. And if you hate it, it's not permanent. If you hate it, you're allowed to pivot. But the thing is, once you dip your toes into a different pond, you realize either that that thing is meant for you, that that approach is a good approach for you to take, or it will open a new door for you that you weren't able to see unless you dipped your toes in that new water. So, like I said before, like it's a win-win situation for you to approach the process of creating from a beginner's perspective, to constantly be the student in whatever thing you are telling yourself you need to be the teacher in. It is so important to live your life as the student. So important. And the fun thing about life is that you can decide at any point to begin again. You don't need a New Year's resolution. You don't need to sit down and journal about 50 different goals you have out for yourself and every single step that you're going to take to get there. You don't need someone telling you how to do it. All you need is trust in yourself that whatever is meant to be is going to be. That you're not running out of time by taking your time to get there. And that you haven't lost any time by not yet giving yourself permission to be the beginner at that thing yet. You haven't lost any time. That's a crippling feeling that I experience at a high level in my life pretty frequently, to be so open with you guys. And you know, it's not until you sit with it for a second that you realize how fucking stupid it is and how controlling it can be, because all it is fear. It's fear covered by a heavy coat of passion, because you think that, you know, it's rooted in this idea that you have this potential set out for yourself that you're not currently operating from yet. But what it really is just this fear trying to come in to make you stagnant and to make you feel like you're constantly hitting a wall in the creative process, when in reality, you always have the option to begin again. You always have the option to say fuck the fear and do it anyways. But if you're constantly relying on how you feel, then that fear is always going to win. Because fear in our physical bodies and in our minds, it feels and sounds so much louder than trust does. Because trust is quiet. Trust is a quiet whisper filled by an empty promise. You know, trust feels so empty because we're so used to operating from fear. And when we're operating from fear, it's constantly noisy, you know, it's constantly telling us something. It's constantly evoking emotion in us and heightening adrenaline and all those things. So to rip that all away and operate from trust for what feels like the first time, it's almost like you have to trust twice when you're doing something for the first time, because you have to first trust that trusting is the right way of doing it. And then you have to trust that you have the ability to take that first stride. So when you ruminate too much on how it feels rather than just doing it, you will constantly feel like you're not good enough. You will constantly feel like you don't have what it takes. And you'll constantly feel like your potential is one step ahead of your ability, which is just no fun. Like, we don't want to feel that way in 2026. We're done with that. We need to step into who we fully are and allow ourselves to be who we're becoming in a way that is natural, in a way that's not forceful, and that allows us to be exactly who we are right now in this current moment, you know? Even if we see fully that it's not who we ultimately want to be. Because, like, are we ever going to feel like the current version of ourselves is the end goal? Like, if we felt that way, there would be no point to existence. There would be no point to doing something new, trying something different, taking the road less traveled. Like, there would be no point to all that, you know? We would just live an unhappy life because we would constantly be doing the same thing and life would just feel like Groundhog Day. And that's just not fun. And I do think that there's something to say about being a creator and being someone who kind of already has somewhat of a platform and sort of already established themselves a little bit on the internet and all that stuff, because you see so often creators take a different route and get pushback for that. Like, for example, Addison Rae blew up on TikTok by doing TikTok dances and whatever. And then she pivoted to making music and trying to become a pop star and all that stuff. And you'll see a million people talk about how she doesn't have what it takes. She's trying too hard to be this, that, and the other thing. And it's like, maybe she's just dipping her toes in a new pond. Maybe she's just trying different things, you know? And the people who truly love her and like resonate with her as a person are going to follow her with no matter what road she takes. And that's what truly builds a community that's full of people who see your vision. You know, the people who see your vision will follow you through no matter what you do. And, you know, people are going to force you into boxes so much in your life, so much. So you have to have the courage to be the person that doesn't force yourself into a box. You have to have the courage to see your potential through and to prioritize your art and to prioritize the hard things sometimes. Like, this new energy of this new year for me is really calling me to do the hard thing. And if you guys listened to my last two episodes, we talked about that a little bit. So you're probably pretty familiar with my headspace on like where I'm at with this new year. But I'm really just feeling called to do the hard thing, to push myself so far outside of my comfort zone that I don't even remember what it felt like to operate inside of my comfort zone, you know? And for that to become my new system of creating, to do what feels scary to me, because that's the only way that you level up as a creator. When you get so complacent with the way that you're creating, it becomes boring. And we as humans hate being bored. We fight boredom on every single level of our lives. And that's why bad habits become addictive to us, because they fill spaces of boredom. Doesn't matter how much we know they're destructive to us. Take social media, for example. We know at this point in our lives, we know how much scrolling on our phones is harming us and doing more harm than good. But it's addictive because it's a form of avoiding boredom. And the reason why we avoid boredom is because we subconsciously know that our potential lies in those states of stillness, in those states of silencing the noise and the story that is constantly being told in our minds. We subconsciously know on some level that our potential lies in the boring, mundane parts of life. So I encourage you and I challenge you this year to dive headfirst into those avenues, to become comfortable with the uncomfortable, to make it your goal to see your potential through, in a way where you're not shaming the current version of you, but you're trusting that the current version you is exactly who you need to be in order to become who you're destined to be. You know, like it's all about trust. It's all about going against the fear and the stories that we're telling ourselves and just doing the hard thing. Sorry to say it, but life is about doing the hard thing. It's not about taking the easy route. And if you want to be seen as important, if you want to be seen as successful, if you want to feel successful, then you have to do the hard thing, because then you understand how much it took to get there. And that's how you're going to feel fulfilled by life ultimately. Because if you get the level of success that you're aspiring to uncover by constantly staying in your comfort zone and not challenging yourself, then you'll live the rest of your life with imposter syndrome of not fully being able to feel that success in your body. And if that's the case, then what's the fucking point? You know, we want to feel good in our lives. That's our ultimate goal, to be honest. All of us just want to feel good doing whatever we're doing. So I think that's all I have for you guys. I'm really enjoying creating in the way that I am right now and exploring this avenue. And like I mentioned countless amount of times in this episode, the only way that I was able to get to this point of creating where I feel like this is the most authentic me is by allowing myself to be surprised every single time I show up creatively. And that's what makes me feel fulfilled by the process, is by, you know, recording an episode and feeling this sense of fulfillment after, through the fact that I surprised myself in the process because I didn't put expectations on myself to meet while I was creating. I just let it flow. I let it happen, and I let myself see what could come out of thinking in this mentality of what's the best possible thing that can happen, rather than what's the worst or the most consequence I could face from seeing this through. So I really hope that you guys were able to take something from this episode, even if it was just that you were able to resonate with what I was saying. And I hope that this year is everything that 2025 wasn't for you. And I have a whole episode on that. So if you haven't listened to that yet, I really encourage you to listen to my past 2 episodes, because they are like the sister episodes to this one. So yeah, see, like I'm just letting myself create, even if I feel like it's too similar to the last project, even if I feel like people are not going to resonate because what this, that, and the other thing, like it doesn't matter. You're never going to be able to predict how your audience feels and what they want and what they're thinking. So there's no point of trying to conform to a made up audience in your mind, you know? Just do what you're being called to do and don't question it, just do it. Because a big part of trusting is just doing it. It's just putting one foot in front of the other without questioning what foot you're putting first. So with that being said, stay tuned for more episodes in this new year that we're in. I can't wait to see what is to come. And if you're not already following me on Instagram or TikTok or YouTube, then go in the show notes below and my socials will be linked there. Just a way for us to connect further and for you to just connect with my content more, because I'm able to sort of craft more creative little crafty things on those accounts. So if you're looking for sort of an extension of this podcast, go ahead and check out those socials. And always feel free to reach out to me, whether that be through leaving a rating or a review on this podcast, because that really helps me, you know, grow the show and reach like-minded people just like you. But my DMs are also open as well if you ever want to connect with me on more of a personal level, whatever it might be. I leave that completely open to your discretion. So thank you guys so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode. Mwah.